Diane and this is Narrow Dreams, and today I'm going to film Neil doing some engine checks and talk about what we learned on the diesel engine maintenance course. Lovely day here in the marina, but I have to tell you that stood on the back is a little bit chilly, because being in December I don't suppose we can expect a lot else really, can we? But as you can see, not a bad day to be out here at all. So this is down into the engine bay. We haven't yet got any of the boards lifted, so as we do, I'll give you a look at what's under there and show you what Neil's doing. Okay, so our batteries are under this, well, our leisure batteries are under this this board. So Neil's just taking the board out. He's actually unplugged the shoreline because you can't get to it unless you do. It's a little bit awkward. That's the only thing with a narrow boat. Everything's sort of squeezed in, so it can be quite awkward to get it out. So there we are. Neil's managed to lift it out, so you can see under there our 4 leisure batteries. They're M110 batteries, and as I say, we've got 4 of them. As you can see, they're all in parallel. So what Neil's going to do now is he's going to check each of the battery cells to see if they need topping up with deionized water, and we've also got a tool that actually checks on the state of each cell to tell you whether it's okay or whether it's on its last legs, basically. So we'll have a look at how that goes. So as you can see, Neil's got gloves on. He's taken the tops off 3 of the cells. As you can see, he's done it with a coin. So the tool that he's got now is testing the electrolytes in the cells. So you just dip it in, and it's just sort of a bulb on top that you squeeze to get some of the battery acid in. That's why he's wearing gloves. You know, you have to be really careful, because remember, it is dilute sulfuric acid in there. So he's bringing it out. I mean, I don't think our batteries are all that great, so let's see. He's not managed to get enough. I think they need topping up, so maybe not got enough fluid in, which is why he's doing what he's doing today. But once he pulls it out and it is floating, I can show you the tool so that you can
actually in the red.
You can see how it works. So if you want to lift it up, Neil. So yeah, these batteries are about done, and we knew they were. So if you can see that, can you bring it closer, Neil? There's actually a gauge inside, and there's green that is fully charged. The middle needs charging, and red means they've about had it. Now that says they've about had it, but that's one cell. It's not always going to be all the cells. And what we're going to do, Neil's going to top them up with deionized water, and then we'll give them a couple of good charges, and then we'll check it again. We're not going to replace them immediately, because they are still charging up and they are holding a charge. But initially, we did what all newbies do, not really understanding what you need to do to the batteries, so we let them get too low. And so we've probably, I mean, I don't know how old they are anyway, but we've probably damaged the batteries. So sometime next year we will be replacing all the batteries. And it can be false economy to just think, oh, the other batteries are all right, we'll replace one, because what tends to happen is that the bad battery pulls all the others down. So when we do replace the batteries, we will be replacing all 4. So he's going to go through and check all of them, and then top them all up. And as I say, then we'll charge them again. We do charge them every day we run the engine. for an hour every day, and sort of once a week we run it for about 3 hours. So it is managing to keep the batteries so that, you know, everything is just ticking over. And luckily, with being in a marina, most of the time we're on shore power anyway, so there's less of a drain on the batteries than there would be if we were out on the canal and we were continuously cruising. So he's gonna do each battery in turn. He doesn't have to do our starter battery because that's actually a sealed battery, so you don't have to do all this with it. Obviously you can still check the charge on them and all that sort of thing, but you don't have to top up the cells and that sort of thing. The batteries do need topping up. They're all at the level that they should be at, so you may be able to see Bella there trying to get in on the action behind Neil. But if they did need topping up, you just top them up in the cells where you take the caps off with deionized water. If you want to arm yourself with one of the testers, if you haven't got one, if you just look for a battery hydrometer, that's what it is, and it will be able to measure the state of each cell on your batteries. So Neil's now attempting to lift the other boards off. He seems to be having difficulty. So there you can see part of the engine under there. So what are you going to do now, Neil?
Gearbox.
So he's going to check the gearbox oil. So he's going to get a paper towel, which I'll show you why in a minute. But if you can see the bit on the front, there, the green bit on the front is the gearbox, and the cap you can see on the top is the filler and where the dipstick is. So Neil's going to take that off and just check the gearbox oil. It's a PRM 150 gearbox, so we'll go through him checking that in a minute. Neil's been and got a piece of kitchen towel, and as you can see, he's drawn a line on it. Why he's drawn a line on it will all become clear very shortly. So Neil's just taking off the that's the dipstick there, as you can see, and he's going to wipe it and then put it back in, but he's going to screw it right down as far as it goes, because it's got to reach to show the right level in the gearbox. And then if he takes it out and lays it on his bit of paper when he gets it out, so put the paper down, lay it on there so you can see where it's up to, so you can see how much oil there is.
And then needs a bit in.
It needs a bit in because it's not up to the mark. It's very difficult.
Can you see, if you put that in the light, can you see the two notches on there?
Yeah, it's very difficult to see the two notches, but if you can just see them there. So it's sort of just on the minimum. But it's very difficult to see where the oil comes up to. So if you use the trick with the paper towel, you can then measure it against it when you know where that is. So I was just going to get a funnel and just top that up a little bit, and then he'll measure it again to make sure it's come up. So obviously you don't put too much in, you don't want it too much, so just a little bit, and then he'll measure it again. So lift out the funnel. And then he's going to measure it again. So again, he'll have to screw it right down so that it shows the right level, and then put it on the paper again and see where we're up to. You should be able to see a difference. The only trouble with narrowboat engines is they're not always that easy to get to, so it's a bit of a stretch. But there you go. So if he lifts it out again, does the same thing with the line. So you can see where it comes up to now. You can see that that's longer, and that should be up to the mark.
Right in the middle.
Yep. So it's right in the middle. So that's perfectly adequate. So Neil's screwing that back down now. So that's the gearbox oil checked. Neil's now taken the other board out so you can see the whole of the engine. It's not a massive engine, it's a Beta Marine 35, so it's 35 horsepower. But it's not bad actually for accessibility, because the board that you can see just under Neil's hands at the front, that actually comes out as well for us to be able to access that front section, so it does make life a little bit easier. You may notice that there's a bit of water in there. That's just a drip from the stern gland, and Neil's just put some nappies down to soak it up. That's quite a good thing to soak up. So Neil's just taking the dipstick out, popping it back in. Now ideally the engine should be warm to do this check, but it isn't at the minute, but he's just doing this so that we can show you how to check your oil and everything. So I was taking the dipstick out, and you can see the level. Is that all right, Neil? Yeah. It will come up. It will come up slightly anyway.
It will drop slightly when I turn the engine on.
Yes, when you turn the engine on, because it warms up. You might notice it was black. That doesn't mean that it's filthy oil. Once an engine's been used a fair bit, as soon as you put new engine oil in, it'll pick that colour up. But as long as you know it's nice clean oil, then it's fine, and do it in the hours that your handbook recommends. An oil change today, but when we do an oil change, I'd have difficulty showing you where the oil filter is actually from this point, because I'm stuck on the back and I can't get to it. But you can see the brass handle. Just point to where the pump is, Neil. Yeah, the brass handle there, and there's a spout on the front of that. Because of how the engine goes in and everything, it'd be very difficult to drain oil from the bottom and get something under to get the oil out. So it has a pump on it that you just pump the old oil out before you refill it with new oil. At the back, the thing with the white label around it that you can see, or the white, the printing on the white, that is the fuel filter. And just in front of it, in the black casing, is the air filter. So all those are things that you change when you do a service. Neil's now just checking the water level. He's taken the cap off, and just from looking in, he said the water level's fine. But what he's also going to do, because obviously we're in winter now, and although we don't need to winterise our boat because we're living aboard, so obviously you know, all the systems will be operating, and the boat's going to be heated and everything. You do need to make sure that you've got adequate antifreeze, and as for everything, there's a tool for that. So Neil has got a tool. Just if you look at that, just tilt it slightly, Neil, because the light's now the other way. Yeah, you can see little coloured discs inside. So what that does, when you put it in, Neil's going to put it in the water and draw up some of the water. It's then going to measure what the level of antifreeze is. So it depends on what floats as to what temperature you're protected down to. It will tell you what temperature you're protected down to. So he's lifting that up. It doesn't seem to be getting enough water in yet, are you, Neil?
It's just leaking back out. There must be an air.
Ah, right. he's having trouble getting it to stay in. It's draining back out. So let's just have another go. And once he gets the water in, then you can see some of the discs starting to float. And the one you go on is the bottom one that floats. So if you read that, Neil, what temperature does it say we're protected down to?
It says -7.
-7. We could probably do with some more antifreeze in there.
Wait a minute.
At that.
It's not that. It's -23.
Oh, no, it's -23. So we're absolutely fine. We know that when it was serviced at Braunston, that was checked anyway, so, you know, it should be all right. But that's the device you would need if you want to test your own antifreeze level and whether it's going to do the job over winter for you. And you just put in antifreeze tester to find one of those on the internet if you want to do that and test your own. The cap off the diesel tank, because he's going to do a check to see if we've got water in the diesel. The way he's going to do that is he's got a piece of metal that we've made sure is clean. You don't want to be introducing dirt into your tank. You just put his thing in front of it, but it's actually called, if you look, it's called colour cut.
It's not long enough.
And it's a paste that you can put on something you're going to use as a dipstick. And if you dip it in, it will, well, I'll show you what it'll do. If it doesn't do it with that, then Neil can dip it in the canal, which I am certain has got water in, and you'll see what happens. So Neil's just going to smear a bit at the end of what he's using as a dipstick. As you can see, it's sort of a mustardy colour. So he's just going to smear that. You can just see him smearing it around there. And then if he dips that into the diesel tank, I'm hoping it comes out more or less the same colour, but let's see. What's happened to it? Okay, so it is the same colour, which means we don't have water in our diesel, which obviously is good news. And just to show you what happens if there is water present, Neil actually then dipped the same stick into water and it goes bright red. So it's now all fastened back up, and we're quite confident that there's no water in the diesel, because obviously that's absolutely not something that you want. So Neil had done a couple of other checks before we started filming, like his alternator belts and his engine mounts and things. So now he's done all the checks, which while we're stood, I mean if we're travelling he does these every day, but while we're stood it's only getting about 8 hours engine running a week, so he just does these checks once a week, unless there's any reason to need to look at anything. The green wire you can see hanging is our Christmas lights, so don't worry about that. So now he's done all his checks, he's actually just going to start the engine up, and we'll leave that running an hour just to charge the batteries up. So that's the sound of the buzz up to tell us that the plugs are warming up, and we started it up. So we start it up with the key obviously, and then if you have a look on the panel, that button there is what we use to stop it. That's the stop button. So we'll leave that running an hour. Hopefully that should get the batteries back up to a level where they're going to run the fridge and the water pump until we charge them up again tomorrow. So that was Neil doing some of the engine checks. He does do other ones that I didn't film. Checks the alternator belts, checks the engine mounts, stern gland. He turns the sort of key thing for the stern valve, but I didn't film those. But all those sort of things were covered on the RYA diesel engine maintenance course that we did at Willow Wren training. There's lots of other things covered. They cover how the engine actually works, which was really interesting for me because I didn't really know that much about it. You know, all about the valve timings and the ignition process of how the diesel burns and all that sort of thing, and obviously looking for any problems that might happen in that and what you would do about it. So I would thoroughly recommend it. You do get a certificate when you've completed it, but it's just the fact of giving you that little bit more confidence, knowing what's what. And the reason I went on it, in reality Neil will probably mostly do the checks and the maintenance and everything on the engine, but you never know what's going to happen, do you? And if at any point I'm left to do them on my own. I mean, actually just before we bought the boat, Neil ended up having an emergency admission to hospital to have his appendix out. Now, you don't know when things like that may happen. If you're actually out cruising, you know, you may have to bring the boat back or whatever. So I wanted that little bit of knowledge, not just for Neil to know how to do it. So I hope you've enjoyed watching. If it's something you fancy doing, as I say, I would recommend it, even for girls. It's a really accessible course and very interesting. And we had a bit of a laugh, you know, and it's a good day out basically, and you learn an awful lot by doing it. So if you've enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you'd like to see future videos, or previous ones obviously, subscribe to the channel. If you click the bell icon, it'll let you know if there's or when a new video comes up. And as I say, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.